you are joining us for the second part of our discussion today, which is on being a new Muslim in a non-Muslim family with my guest, Sister Amina and Brother Bilal. Um, Continuing on from our discussion prior to the break, personal questions. Now, what I mean by personal questions is sometimes, because obviously we're talking about families and becoming a Muslim, sometimes we get asked some personal questions. I don't know whether it's because we've been brought up in the West and there's this kind of space concept of, don't invade my space and so on and so forth. How should we react, or is it to be condemned if people start asking us personal questions, like for a sister, for example, might be asked, were you married before? Or did you have a boyfriend before you became Muslim? Or for us guys, it tends to be, did you go night clubbing? Did you do X, Y, and Z? And how was it? What was the experience like? Are these legitimate questions for us to answer, or not?
Well, with regards to what we were talking about before, I do find there's a number of personal questions with regards to family issues. And I don't mind if someone who I know asks me a personal question. I do sometimes reserve the right not to answer. But for example, I know who you are. I know your name. Have some idea of who you are. I don't mind if you ask me something about my life. But sometimes you do get complete strangers coming up to you at the grocery store or underground. No clue who they are. They don't even kind of bother to introduce themselves. And they ask you things that you have to wonder, how would they feel if someone asked them? And with regards to family issues, I do get a lot of, well, how did your parents react when you became a Muslim? And I have to admit, because you hear it so often, it's kind of like, well, what do you want me to say? We all got up and sang hallelujah in the streets. I mean, so oftentimes I say things, well, how would your parents react if you became a Jew? But very seriously, I think I'm good at this. And then usually it's like, oh, well.
Yeah, you normally ask that question, do you?
I often do, because I've been in this situation before, and it's like, I don't think they'd be very happy if I became a Jew. They'd be upset. Oh, really? Okay, let's move on. But I think what really bothers me here on a deeper level is that in Islamic belief, we are supposed to respect our parents. And of course, I admit I've perhaps aired more dirty laundry today than I'm comfortable with, for a good cause, inshallah. But I don't do that socially speaking. If I have family problems, I don't really feel the need to tell every single person in the world. It's not always respectful to them. We should have some honor for our families. In Islamic cultures, different cultures where Islam is practiced, people don't go out on the street and badmouth their parents. I mean, you could have World War III going on in your house or with your wife or whatever, but you don't tell the average stranger. You keep your dignity and respect. So I do have to wonder why people feel comfortable asking questions, which in many cases the only answers there are sometimes disrespectful answers. And so I have tried to explain that to some people, that this is a question that might not put them in a good light and it wouldn't be good to answer. But I think it's important also to be conscientious of that when asking people questions which might not have a nice answer. And of course, again, it's not just about converting. I mean, someone who could be getting a divorce would be like, oh, how come you're divorcing your wife or your husband? And, perhaps they've done some god-awful thing that's horribly embarrassing, just for their personal respect, you don't really want to broadcast it. So I think it is good to be tactful and considerate in what we ask of people, especially strangers.
I think in your case, it's quite surprising to hear, and I don't know if Brother Bilal will agree with me, that people would just approach you on the street and don't know you from anywhere and just start asking you these random questions. Because I guess for me, even just to be recognized as a Muslim on the street is quite difficult. Sometimes I would salam a Muslim on the street and the person would just walk past me and I'm like, hello, I just salamed you. And according to what I understand, if you somebody,
should
there's
return it.
an obligation upon you to return it.
I think there's a few things going on here. One, I've come to realize I think I just look nice and people feel very comfortable saying lots of things to me. That's just a personal thing. Of course, you look nice too. But, I just think I invite this sort of confession and question sort of thing. And I'm female. I think that's different too. And especially when it comes to family issues, I think both in Western and Eastern cultures, there's kind of a strong picture that the female is the bearer of culture. She's the caretaker. The daughter is the one who stays at home and cares for the family. And so you're in different roles. So people perhaps...
Maybe some truth to that also, actually.
There's a lot of truth to it. But, that's in people's mind. And also, I think being white has something to do with it too. We know there are Muslims in Africa. We know not everyone is Muslim, but it's not like we've never seen an African Muslim. There are more white Muslims nowadays, and of course there's Muslims in Bosnia and so forth, but we, as an ummah, we don't necessarily have a picture of a Muslim as being someone who's white. So I think that also invites more of it too. Many things going on.
That is.
I'd agree with that. There's probably more. There's a curious element.
Novelty, if you wouldn't mind us saying. Yeah.
But from my perspective about people asking personal questions, it does happen a lot, and it doesn't go down good with me. But like, how can I say? Sister mentioned something. It's almost like you didn't use the word contextual, but that's what I was thinking of. The context of you knowing somebody, or even if you haven't met a person before, you meet them at a Mamba or you're somewhere where you start conversating. It's Assalamu alaikum, alaikum salam. Say, oh, I'm brother so and so. I live up there, or I do this or whatever. This is me, and I just I've met you before. Pleased to meet you. You're having some kind of dialogue, and then within that dialogue, they say, oh right. So your parents aren't Muslim. Okay, so did you? It's a different context. But sometimes people come up to you and even just go straight for the jugular, and you're thinking like, we're talking just basic social skills. Just I can understand why probably people are, people will ask questions when they're kind of thinking, I wonder if you convert to Islam and stuff like that. I know they're Muslims in Africa, but maybe he's from London. So the first thing, like, where are you from? Oh, I'm from London.
Yeah.
Where? No, I mean, where were you born? In London. No, but really. Yeah, I'm serious.
Yeah.
All right, your family then, and then they say where I say, oh, okay, like now.
Well, perhaps the first question that should be asked is, did you convert to Islam? I know it's terribly frustrating for some second-generation Muslims whose parents perhaps converted. They've been raised in Islam, and people just assume they converted, or even people who just don't look like the typical Muslim on the street. And to be honest, it's not just about people from the West. Unfortunately, I'm not sure why in this day and age we don't always have as strong of an awareness of the diversity of the Muslim Ummah. I mean, for example, I have friends from the Indian subcontinent who've gone to Islamic centers of other nationalities or in the Middle East, and it's, oh, did you convert to Islam? And this is one of the world's largest Muslim populations.
Funny you should mention that. I remember a sister, a European sister, I won't say what country she came from, but a European sister who wears hijab was in Morocco and went into one of the masjids there to go do salah. And they said, no, you can't come in, this is for Muslims. With a hijab on her head. So, but inshallah, times are changing.
Inshallah.
So there you go. Yeah. I remember actually being in Morocco once, and I bought my first set of Quran tapes, because in those days we didn't really have CDs or MP3s and stuff like that.
Showing your age
and
now.
Yeah, I know, tell me about it. And the guy would not sell me the tapes. He said, no, I can only sell this to Muslims. And I said, well, I am a Muslim. He said, no, only Muslims. And it was only until I recited Surah Al-Fatiha for him that he said, okay.
This is very bad. This is very bad.
Inshallah, things have changed. I mean, this was the situation. And anyway, I could go on all day, and maybe that wouldn't be right. Another thing that I'm sure you've encountered on numerous occasions, I'm sure, because it's happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to you, and that is born Muslim brothers and sisters telling you how great you are because of the fact that you've converted to Islam, and I was a born Muslim and it was on the plate for me, and you had to search for it, so your deen, and make dua for me because your prayers are going to be accepted, and mine, I'm such a lowly person in comparison. Is this a reality? Is this realistic? Is this your understanding of your station in comparison to some of these people that think this way?
Well, not personally, and in terms of the reverts that I come in contact with, that would be maybe, I'm thinking that counselling wise, there may be something going on for the person or the people that say that kind of thing. It might be it's their stuff, because I'm sure the reverts are not putting that out there, and there is no grand institution or big thing that necessarily the converts have come together and done why brothers or sisters would feel that way. So I guess it's maybe their own, things that are going on for them in their Islam, and they just feel self-conscious or something like that. But I find it strange. I find it,
Brother Bilal, how could you say that? Astaghfirullah. No, I'm just kidding. No, we're very flawed people. But I think perhaps the thing that people don't realize and I've tried to verbalize this on some occasions, is many people see coming to Islam as an instant. You say the Shahadatain and you're insta-Muslim, you know? But conversion is a process, and you begin, it's like climbing a mountain. When you say the Shahada, you make the commitment, you know, it's kind of like saying your wedding vows, and then you start the climb.
Yes.
So the commitment is to keep climbing, but it's a very difficult and lengthy process. And it's not just having to do with conversion. This is the human condition. We are put into this world as, you know, essentially as blank slates by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with just a fitrah and some circumstances. We have to refine our souls. We have to mature, develop our humanity, and find our ways to Him. And we end up in different parts of the summit, and that's where we end up in the akhirah. But it's not as if simply converting to Islam sort of short-circuits the process and gets you on the top of the mountain. Of course, I am flattered if people have a high opinion of me, and I appreciate it genuinely. As the dua says, we should, you know, we should pray that people have a good opinion of us while still being humble inside of ourselves. But realistically, we know our challenges and our flaws. But I do think perhaps it might put someone under a lot of pressure to put this idea on them. I don't always necessarily like to delve into personal examples, but I mean, I met a lady when I was a late teenager who used to call me an angel, and she'd say, I'm the angel, and if I'm just sitting here, she'd say, am I praying for her? And maybe I was just sitting there, you know. It's almost too much, you know, because I wasn't a saint or any sort of great spiritual figure. I was just trying to find my way in life with a commitment and, inshallah, a very basic awareness of, you know, the spiritual. So, yeah, it's not really, I don't think it's a healthy way to look at people, although I'm sure we all appreciate the thought and the compliment, but, you know.
However,
and no need to be self-effacing either.
However, I do think we could probably extract a positive element, because I know from my personal experience that coming into contact with maybe people that were Muslims that I grew up with that didn't really, as children, we grew up as children, so they were Muslim, but they weren't, you know, outwardly, it was more of a cultural thing, but just coming into contact with them as adults and, oh, so you're Muslim now, and I could see that it had an impact, or, you know, in our conversations and things of that nature later on, and seeing them becoming more religious, or not by me saying anything to them. I didn't have no, I wasn't aware of any information that they hadn't, they necessarily wasn't aware of. But maybe just me becoming a Muslim gave them some inspiration to kind of get back into, not kind of, but, you know, to get back into their faith, or to, you know, look a bit deeper. So from that aspect, maybe reverts being around in Muslim sense, or coming into contact with people who are born Muslim, maybe just gives a little something, a little, you know, a little glimmer of hope or inspiration, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and of course for us as well, yes, we know our own reality, we know our own flaws, as you said yourself, but also I suppose it's for us a case of striking the balance. So if we are called, I've never been called an angel personally, but if we are, you know, treated in this way where, you know, we're considered to be such angelic beings, at the same time, you know, we shouldn't maybe do ourselves an injustice and say, no, astaghfirullah, I'm such a bad person, and, you know, because that's sometimes, I tend to call it false piety. You know, we need to try and strike a balance. Well, maybe I'm not quite an angel, but, you know, I'm trying to.
But I'll give it a try.
Yeah, no, the dignity is a very important point. It's wajib to preserve our dignity as Muslims, without a doubt, and we shouldn't talk about it if we're doing something wrong. But I think perhaps, I don't want to hurt anyone's good intentions who says this, but it is a bit of false flattery, because sometimes you do get two very different messages. On the one hand, you get, oh, sister, you're so much better than us, mashallah, we were born into Islam, you weren't, etc. You know, but then perhaps you aren't being treated with the concordant respect in general that perhaps someone from a different background
on a
might.
practical level, you mean?
Yeah, so you're kind of getting some mixed messages, neither which is really true. I mean, in the end, we are all just humans, members of the human condition. God knows, conversion to Islam has been going on for, you know, hundreds of years, over 1,000 years, and we happen to be in the here and now. And I mean, it is, inshallah, we can inspire someone. And I don't even mean as a convert. I mean, if we as human beings can inspire someone to move forward or move towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a blessing and it's thawab. But it's also not, first of all, it's not our responsibility necessarily to inspire someone. Now, of course, it's a good thing, and I really respect those people who do community work, but The amana was given to all human beings. We all have the responsibility, inborn, to find the path to God, whether we're born into it or not. And so if someone's not doing that as an adult, that is their lack.
Yeah.
And it's, they shouldn't need to see someone. Now, of course, it's great if they see someone. I don't mean to be, being a little bit harsh here, but, just putting it to that context. And from the Islamic perspective, again, we have to remember, as we teach from the mimbar, well, I don't teach, but you teach from the mimbar.
No, I don't.
Islam is the religion for all people and all times. It is the final revelation,
Yes.
the absolute revelation. So you really shouldn't need to see anyone else practicing it, even one other human being, to follow it. And so that perhaps points to some social issues we might have in our community that I think, need to be sometimes addressed head on.
That's a good point. Yeah, and maybe inshallah on another occasion we could talk about, because this relates to a bugbear of mine, and that is stuff like, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but some people are quite fascinated by, I don't know, there's a fish that's been opened, and in the fish you see the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or I remember apparently somewhere,
You cut a fruit
yeah,
open.
or apparently there was a wood, a forest in West Germany or East Germany back in those days, and the way in which the tree trunks had been situated, you could kind of decipher La ilaha illallah and so on and so forth. These things, alhamdulillah, they're all signs of Allah at the end of the day, all ayatullah. But should this increase or decrease one's belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In theory, whether I were the last person on this earth, it shouldn't affect my belief in Allah. Of course, the social interaction or lack of social interaction with not having any other Muslims around will affect me, but the concept in itself.
Well, and Allah has created the forest and the fruits and, us, and this is enough of a sign of Allah. We don't need to see it necessarily in a fruit.
Yes.
And Allah's signs, I think, are more subtle most of the time than simply writing Allah.
course.
Although there's no reason why
Why
he
it can't
couldn't
be
if
that,
it
of
moves
course.
someone.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So, to conclude, because we are obviously approaching the end of the program, what advice can we offer those who are reverting to Islam? Because, of course, we're talking about a revert in a non-Muslim environment because of his family. How should he or she deal with the parents?
I would have to say how they could, maybe not how they should, but how they could, would be to adopt, adopt some patience and some understanding, even if they're very young and they're reverting to Islam, just to adopt some patience and remember that you now are an ambassador of Islam, and your actions will speak louder than what you say. So while you can quote verse and chapter, and if you come from a Christian family, you can show why God is one in the Bible and the Trinity is a fallacy, and all these things, historical information, that won't impact, as powerful as that information can be, that will not impact in a way as you exemplifying, the Muslim character to the best of your ability, and being kind. That word kind, not kind just thrown out there as just a vague word, but being kind to your parents. And I think that is the best thing that you could do if you have a good relationship, or you're hoping to get a good relationship with your parents.
Inshallah.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned a couple things when not arguing, restraining one's anger or emotions, and also trying to understand what your parents or relatives might be going through, why they might be upset. Definitely one of the things I've realized, and perhaps maybe, I'm not sure whether people in our community get it, is that there are so many other issues that go on. For many people, it's not a theological issue. Now, for some people it is, because I've known children also of Christian priests who became Muslim. Obviously, if a father has dedicated his life to the church, he doesn't want to see his daughter become an infidel, but so there are people who have genuine theological concerns and their children will go to hell. But there is just a whole host of other issues, identity issues, socio-cultural issues, the historical conflict between the Muslim world and the West, the portrayal of Muslims today, and fear about the child's future, and having a picture in their mind of what their child will turn out to be.
A terrorist. Sometimes this is what...
I was definitely... dealing with that in my situation, but I actually meant the ideal before Islam which would be, my child will grow up and do X, Y, Z, and this will be, even if parents don't always communicate their ideals, sometimes they do. Sometimes the child comes out of the womb and, oh, my little doctor, mashallah. So we know what the parents want. Sometimes they're not direct about it, but oftentimes the ideals are very subconscious. And many life changes can shatter a parent's ideals. A disease or a divorce, something traumatic. Conversion to Islam, again, it is a death of ideals for many parents.
It may be seen as a loss.
It can be. Now, it really it depends, of course, on their worldview, if it's something they think is positive. But, of course, there can be acceptance of that, which is ultimately what has to happen in a time of loss, because the nature of loss is we can't do anything about it. Some families, even if they're upset, they will learn to embrace it as something positive. Some never will. It just depends. But just being, I think, compassionate, like I was saying, that there is something going on the other side. It's not just you going through this process. And one more thing I would suggest, if at all possible, and it's not always possible, to try to find someone in the community with wisdom, insight, perhaps even knows a bit about psychology like yourself, who can actually help you through what's going on. Because, although it's great to have a peer group, but your peers aren't always able to help you with your problems in life, as we know, especially when we're younger. They perhaps have not had the life experience to see things from the parent's side. And I'm sure, you've probably heard all sorts of advice too. I mean, you have, the rampaging, hyper Sunnah Salafi. I don't mean Sunni, but I mean you have to wear your torn dish dasha and eat with your hands, and kuffar, haram, they're going to hell. And so I mean that's I heard a lot of that. I'm sure you heard a lot of that, and that's not the best voice to be hearing when you're dealing with these family issues. And on the other hand, you kind of have the I don't know how to put it really politely, the assimilationist voice, which is we're living in the West. So we have to be Western Muslims, and you're Western, so it's okay. And, you shouldn't change your name because Christopher or Christian is a very good name. And, it's like they're kind of perhaps not seeing things from your perspective. And the fact is, you are different. You are a Muslim. You've got a different identity than your family, and that's a reality. You can't really sugarcoat that and just pretend we're all the same and there's no differences. So both of these extremes are voices that probably we might hear. So finding someone who is spiritually grounded, who has kind of the religious priorities in mind, but understands what's going on and can sort of help and counsel you through it, I think would be very valuable.
That's quite an interesting point as well, because I think this is something that we could look at on another show, and that is if you like, a support structure.
I was thinking of the idea of like a mentor.
Yeah, or a mentor, because I would say it took me maybe 5 years to finally feel comfortable, understand maybe the weaknesses within myself, not necessarily have dealt with them, but at least be working towards trying to fix them, but also understanding the intricacies of the Muslim Ummah, if you like, and the types of mentalities about it. And basically what I'm trying to say is understand my place in the world and finally understand what my role in this world is, and then move on. Because as you were saying earlier, when you first convert, what you consider to be haqq, what you consider to be the truth, changes. The goalposts are always moving. And they tend to move around that football pitch, and it's only after a number of years that you actually place them somewhere and they pretty much stay there. They may move slightly, but...
Well, psychologically speaking, as you know, but of course in education we have to go through all these psychological theories, that's exactly what they say with regards to identity and change of identity, which is a fairly common modern phenomenon. Of course, we take our identities from all sorts of things, occupation, family, religion. But if you experience a significant change of identity, and I would say converting to Islam is a significant change,
Definitely.
and perhaps we can discuss that on another show, you need to work out how you relate to the world. What is my new role in the world because of this new identity? And that sort of takes priority over other things in life. And it is something, ultimately, these, like most questions, the answers do need to come from inside. But I think help and guidance through that, especially spiritually wise guidance, can be very valuable.
Inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah. Thank you very, very much. Inshallah, as you said, I think on another show we need to start looking at the concept of identity with the kind of, if you like, different cultural influences that impact on somebody when they revert to Islam. But yes, thank you once again for today's show. It's been very, very interesting and I've learned a lot, as I'm sure our viewers have. Thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum.